Welcome back. You're here with Goldberg. Today I want to talk about Jordan the Lobster Peterson. Now, there are some people under the impression that I don't like this guy, and frankly, I've always been indifferent about him. I have a bigger issue with his fans and how they tend to look at the world and respond to particular observations which are valid. So, when he came on the scene, I was like, alright, everyone's crazy about Jordan Peterson. I started reading or listening to him, and I'm like, okay, he's basically repackaging the standard self-improvement guru thing, except he's an intellectual, so maybe people feel that's different. Nothing wrong with that inherently if you want to change circumstances in your own life. I encourage everyone to do that on a consistent basis. Cleaning your room, don't fixate on problems that essentially are nearby to you, but focus on what you can solve and be a better person. That's fantastic. But you do find from his fans this tendency to argue that you're being a victim if you point out any larger scale issues beyond your control that perhaps could be addressed with some measure of collective action. In fact, they think that collective action is like communism or leftism, and so you can't do that. At least that's the impression I've received. I'm sure there are people who don't take that position, but this atomized individualistic cult mentality is not helpful. And frankly, I think it can backfire. It can be used for people who are trying to avoid difficult questions in life. And for starters, and I'm not mocking him, I don't celebrate the fact that this occurred. You know that Jordan Peterson has struggled with depression for a very long time, and then ended up in rehab once or twice for using SSRIs. Again, we're not mocking him, not celebrating that. The point is, was Jordan Peterson using the individualistic message as a way to essentially get around the fact that he struggles with depression? Because that's a pretty serious issue. We shouldn't just, write it off or mock it. And that's what concerns me when people constantly say, no, stop complaining, be an individual. It's like, well, there are some very real issues. There are some things that should be given more serious attention in terms of social dynamics, in terms of political, international, economic, instead of being brushed aside because you have no right to complain, just be an individual. And again, this is not necessarily Jordan Peterson, but it's his supporters. That's how they tend to interpret the message and how they respond to others who point out legitimate issues that we can make a difference. And we've seen in the last couple of years that people getting together under common notions of what should change, how that can work. But if you have the absolute individualistic mentality, you will have a propensity to simply dismiss that outright as being you're a victim or you're a leftist or something. I don't think that's helpful. Okay. You also saw that Jordan Peterson would wade into certain arenas where he really didn't, I'd say he was out of his character. He was in over his head, didn't really know what he was talking about. And I think a good example of that, one that you've seen a lot of folks addressing time to on the internet, is the question of human relationships, romantic, whatnot. He had this cringy argument of how to maintain monogamy that made him seem like he's not living in the present day, which he was married some years ago, so that's somewhat understandable. But to give you an example of it, okay, you can improve yourself, be your best person, whatever. I had stumbled on this channel, I think it was yesterday, never heard of it before, but this guy had done a lot of content, and now not so much for the last couple of years. But it was like Jake's Show or Jake Shock, something like that. This dude from Canada, very down to earth, and he was born with a rare iris condition. It almost makes him look like he has a glass eye. Also didn't have a lot of height at the end of the day. And he talks about his struggles and how he dealt with all that stuff, and he got into PUA, he got into the self-improvement, and he's like, but of course the romantic side didn't really play out. And you could understand, as much as people talk about equality and just improve your own situation, improve your life, there are certain people who, by virtue of how they're born, there isn't that much they can change. And so they might end up, doing all the self-improvement stuff and still be in a situation like Jordan Peterson, immensely depressed. How does individualism and improving yourself solve fundamental problems that you were born with? That's just an idea. There was another one that I don't know if this is a new video or not, but it came up in the recommended. And it was this really cringy Indian dude in tears saying that, we had to look to the Muslims because they knew what's right and women keep rejecting him. So you understand that there are people out there who are in a bad way, all right, for whatever reason. And maybe they've done all the self-improvement stuff. And maybe they're still sitting there going, shoot, what's going to happen? Am I kind of doomed to this position forever? And I don't think that the Jordan Peterson message helps them very much. Just like issues that are beyond your control, you can clean your room all day, but that doesn't mean the Fed's going to stop printing money. You can clean your room all day. It doesn't mean that that's going to make coronavirus go away, unless you already had it and then you sanitize your room. There are issues that are a lot bigger. For years, there were folks, those of us talking about the issue of open borders. And so, oh, no. Politically acceptable was to talk about protecting Iraq's borders, right? Well, finally, you got a guy who is very imperfect, but at least he's making some changes. Unfortunately, they're just going into effect now because they've been tied up in the court with injunctions. If you had the atomized individual attitude of a lot of Jordan Peterson fans, you wouldn't even bother voting, you wouldn't get involved, you wouldn't do anything because you'd say, stop being a victim, focus on yourself. But as we can see, there are some real issues that you cannot solve on an individual basis, but could very well improve your own life and the life of others around you and in the future. That does not mean that it's wrong because it's collectivist or it's leftist or it's being a victim. But if you have the mentality of a lot of these folks, they think that they're scoring some point. It's like some social status. I don't need anyone. I'm just improving myself. It's like, that's good for you. And it's not a bad starting point to better where you are. But at a certain point, you have to realize there are serious issues out there that can't be solved by just, a 5-point plan for yourself. So that's my view of Jordan Peterson. I don't think he's terribly harmful. I do wish that he would stop allowing his kids, his daughter especially, to piggyback off of him to make money because she's been giving out some really, really suspect information to people based upon his last name. And that's just the thing. Nothing wrong with telling people to improve themselves, but understand context and understand scale so you don't turn people off from getting together and making significant and measurable change that will benefit us all.